Hello, welcome. This is Headlocks and Headphones with you for about an hour. This week, we're going to be talking about wrestling news. We're going to look into Payback, Raw, SmackDown, NXT, and we're going to look at how did AEW fare without competition? Did their ratings go up? And if so, did they gain the entire NXT audience? That's something we're going to find out in wrestling news. So obviously the biggest news story that is around the world right now is COVID-19. This week, The Rock announced that himself and his family have all tested positive. He says that he's kind of had a difficult time with it. Luckily, his daughter's been kind of okay. His wife is still struggling. And that's one of the interesting things. I think the people out there who think that it's all make-believe and it's all a con just to control us, I mean, that's fine if they want to believe that. But there's enough people out there that have had it, and at some level, it exists, it's out there. So if you're a conspiracy nut that thinks it's all about the government trying to control you, then wind your neck in, get your head in check. It's one of those important things people need to realize. There are, of course, the conspiracy nuts mentioning that The Rock's just been paid to say this, and The Rock is just a PR stunt for the COVID movement, which I've never heard of the COVID movement, but apparently it exists, particularly if you're Alex Jones. But beyond The Rock, Kevin Nash responded to him by saying, "Welcome to the team. Very sorry your family is infected. I was tired for a while, didn't train for the fourth day. My wife still hasn't got smell or taste back. Son was asymptomatic. Pray you heal up quickly." And to be honest, that wasn't the only person that got it. AJ Styles has since announced that he tested positive for COVID-19. You add that to Renee Young, and that's potentially one of the reasons why she left. WWE backlash against her going public about her COVID-19 positive, which I don't think there's going to be any real backlash against AJ Styles because of how the WWE have already treated AJ Styles in recent months, including the fact that they fired his best friends and Paul Heyman lied about it. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But it is quite interesting to see that WWE have had a couple of people that are kind of alumni and a couple of people on their active roster. Now, bear in mind, 30 people allegedly tested positive for COVID-19 on the WWE shows behind closed doors. So it is interesting to see how many other people might come out and say they've tested positive. Paul Cruz, several others are known to have taken time off due to positive tests. And whether or not the WWE will eventually reveal the list of people, I think eventually somebody will get a hold of that list and we will find out everybody who tested positive for COVID-19. Now, one of the things that's quite interesting here is that with AJ Styles, he obviously announced after The Rock's announcement that he had COVID-19. But one of the other news stories was obviously the arrival of Paul Heyman on SmackDown, a brand that he moved to get away from Paul Heyman. Now, according to AJ Styles, he says it's water under the bridge, and there was anger when things happened, and obviously Paul Heyman's not in charge anymore, so that makes the dynamic a little bit different. He does say there's going to be no animosity and no tension, but when you lie directly at somebody's face, something that Paul Heyman's very famous for, it's going to be very hard to trust that person ever again. So particularly if AJ Styles and Roman Reigns end up doing a program together, it'd be quite interesting to see the interaction between AJ and Paul Heyman. Now, let's talk about an alumni of Paul Heyman's company, ECW. We're talking about Taz, who still owns the copyright for the FTW Championship. He designed it in 1998. He also paid for its creation and created the name of it as well. Now, what's quite interesting is that Tony Khan has said he's looking into the possibility of a TV series involving that title, which should be quite interesting. Now, it depends what they do with it in terms of how they produce it. Something like The Ultimate Fighter would be quite interesting, where the people who win things on the game show, the TV show, I think it's going to be more like a game show, win things on this TV show would get a shot at the title on AEW Dynamite. That should be the prize. You appear on this B show, you get a chance to be on the A show. Now, this is a title that's been defended against Brian Pillman Jr. It hasn't really been defended very often on AEW, but it'd be quite interesting to see where that goes. I'm a fan of Taz. He's a great talker, and that's one of the important things that AEW have been missing in recent months is talkers, people who can go out there and talk. I know people say Brody Lee can talk, but he can't. I know people say that Cody Rhodes can talk, but a particular group of people like him, a particular group of people don't like his promo style. So having somebody like Taz, who has is important. Now, All Elite Wrestling had an unopposed Wednesday night, and some people were saying that should mean AEW can get way over 1 million views because they'll be combining the AEW and NXT audience. However, that didn't appear to be the case. What happened was last week's viewership was 813,000. This week's was 928. They did get a rise. However, 928,000 is not the highest rating they've had this year. That happened on January the 1st, 967,000. So even though they were unopposed, they couldn't beat their best audience, which for me suggests that AEW have an audience, and that isn't likely to just instantly grow. It may organically grow, it may organically drop off. There are so many variables, but the AEW fan and the NXT fan are not the same thing. So it's going to be quite interesting to see what happens in the next couple of months in regards to how they cope with NXT possibly moving to a different night, because the perception was they're splitting the audience, and obviously this week has shown that they're not. Now, NXT UK returns in a couple of weeks, and it was announced by Triple H that they have a brand new theme song. I will read the quote directly from him. NXT is a brand that represents more than in-ring competition. It's your brand with your superstars and your sound. Excited to have This Is Wargasm UK join the NXT Loud roster in this new era of NXT UK. So the song is God of War by Wargasm. NXT UK with a slightly different feel. If you haven't heard it, go out of your way. Not my cup of tea in terms of what I would listen to regularly, but certainly at a live venue, I think that song's going to go very well. Now, Roman Reigns returned last week on SmackDown to WWE TV, but he did, of course, make an appearance at SummerSlam the Sunday before, and Roman Reigns said that he wanted a change of pace on his wrestling persona, and according to Dave Meltzer, it was Roman Reigns who requested to become a heel when he made his return at SummerSlam. Now, it's unknown if Reigns wanted the other part of that story to happen, and we will reveal that when we talk about the shows. But certainly the heel turn was something that he wanted. Now, the NWA have had a great couple of years. One of the things I was quite excited about when it returned, the NWA Power, I actually watched the first 6 or 7 episodes as they aired. I was very happy with the product that they put out. It has, of course, veered slightly away from that, and it's not as good as it was. However, the absence of Dave Lagana has meant that the booking duties are kind of going to be laid onto somebody new. Thunder Rosa, who is their women's champion, put her name forward to become their booker, and it's going to be quite interesting. This is a girl who has appeared in recent weeks on AEW with a great video package, clearly edited and produced by the NWA, because it was so much better than the AEW produced content, that just demonstrated why NWA is so important in the wrestling landscape. And hopefully some people will take heed of the content that they're producing. Now, talking of content, WWE had somebody a few years ago, and I don't think anybody really liked her, and they kind of delayed putting on her first match and found ways to avoid having it, and for good reason. She was awful. Eva Marie has said she has unfinished business in WWE, and let me point out that you really, really don't. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody is clamoring for an Eva Marie return. I really just don't see that ever happening. But this is the week where WWE officials have had to basically deal with the fact that they've removed Brock Lesnar's merchandise from WWE.com, and it looks like his contract has expired. That's led to Tony Khan saying that he is a big fan of Brock Lesnar. However, it is believed by WWE officials Brock Lesnar won't be heading to AEW anytime soon. He doesn't want to head to a secondary brand, or at least in terms of people's perception. He also is somebody who has regularly had his contract expire with WWE, and it's apparently part of the dance between Vince and Brock Lesnar, and it's quite interesting to see that the options he has are UFC. I don't think he physically could compete in UFC at this point in his career. He's also at the point where he could potentially do a fight here or there in Japan and make quite a lot of money from that. The Japanese audience very receptive to Brock Lesnar when he was younger. I certainly think that they would be very receptive to him now. However, the expectation is that when fans return to WWE, so will Brock Lesnar. There is, of course, comments from Chris Jericho where he basically said that as soon as money comes in from Saudi Arabia for another show, the likelihood is Brock Lesnar's on that wanted list, and that's going to be more money than AEW would offer. There is also the amount of money that would take to tear him away from WWE. Chris Jericho said the following: A, it would be astronomical. B, Vince will never allow it to happen. And C, I don't know if you can make that investment back. The profitability of AEW isn't there yet. So spending the money on Brock Lesnar wouldn't be a financially viable option. That, for me, is probably the most solid evidence that WWE will likely be the ones that keep Brock Lesnar. He's made enough money. He doesn't have to go on the road. So he's quite lucky he can pick and choose when he wants to work. Now, before we move on quite quickly, Chris Jericho did talk about the Thunderdome, and he said that WWE have lucked out. It looks great, but obviously they would rather have 500 real fans than 1,000 TV screen fans. And you know what? I agree. Every now and again, Chris Jericho does things in character. Certain times he does things out of character, and the out of character stuff, I tend to agree with him. So it's quite interesting. I think WWE, they're making the best of a bad situation, but it's quite good to see that Jericho understands that obviously WWE don't want to have these screens there. Certainly with the screens being abused by people with KKK images and Chris Benoit and putting Kenny Omega's face up there. It's one of those things where obviously the WWE would love to have fans, and Chris Jericho understands that, and I think so do we all. So it's going to be quite interesting to see. Now, in recent weeks, Renee Young announced her departure from WWE. She got a big send-off, a big goodbye. One of the things that didn't get a big shout-out on the internet was the departure of Mauro Ranallo. Mauro Ranallo was, of course, the lead announcer for NXT and hasn't been able to show up to tapings and stuff in recent months due to COVID. He is stuck at home. I believe he lives in Canada and can't travel. He certainly lives a distance enough away that he's opted to do everything by satellite, which has worked quite well. Mauro Ranallo's presentation style is something that was very unique in WWE and came across very well. Sadly, we're now left with all the Michael Cole clones that we've kind of come to despise in WWE. However, Mauro Ranallo and WWE, it's not somebody quitting, it's not somebody being fired, it's the contract coming up and both parties deciding not to renew it. Mauro Ranallo has gigs with HBO, he has gigs with several other organizations, so he's not going to be struggling for work. The problem often was he had too much going, and I think with the fact that he needs to balance out his life for WWE and for Mauro Ranallo, this may be the best option, with the ability to get Mauro to come in and work shows here and there if they want to. Mauro is somebody that, he's like Marmite. The fans either love him or hate him. I personally love him. I think his passion for the business is something special. So Vic Joseph or whoever they have coming in to fill that slot is going to have big shoes to fill. I think obviously Tom Phillips has been doing bits and bobs on NXT. I would like to see Vic Joseph perhaps with the returning Wade Barrett, because that Wade Barrett appears to be a way to sign a contract. There is, of course, reports of Nigel McGuinness potentially coming back as well. So I would love to see Wade Barrett and Vic Joseph, if the rumours are true that Nigel McGuinness is going to return solely to NXT UK, at least until we can get audiences back, because Nigel McGuinness was furloughed in April. He was one of the ones that weren't really on the list of furloughed talent, but he was furloughed back in April because they just had no use for him. It was too difficult to get him to fly in for shows. So WWE have some big things to do in the next little while in terms of the announcers. I certainly think that the Michael Cole clones are not the future for WWE. There needs to be somebody with a little bit of passion, and hopefully WWE have something up their sleeve that will improve the announcing in coming years, because there's rumours that Michael Cole wants to take a step back and produce. And if that's the case after how long he's been on air, then great. But let's try and get a change in production style. The reason that people dislike the announcers is because they all sound the same. So let's get somebody in that's a little bit different, but still perhaps within the system. So one last story we're going to talk about here is the fact that WWE have actually filed a new trademark, Show Up and Win. The trademark is for clothing, namely tops, shirts, jackets, sweatshirts, hoodies, outerwear, including coats, bottoms, pants, shorts, underwear, dresses, and lingerie, clothing, ties. Wait a second. WWE are going to be producing lingerie? I like lingerie and I like WWE. I don't know how I feel about thinking about Brock Lesnar when I see lingerie. obviously, WWE is always going to be the number one show on TV. SmackDown is the biggest network, the biggest money generator for WWE. And one of the interesting things is they are clearly putting a big push onto SmackDown in recent weeks. We obviously had Matt Riddle versus Shorty G, which is continuing the proper full-on turn of Shorty G and abandoning that name as well. We also saw Jeff Hardy versus Shinsuke Nakamura in a great match. Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler called out Bayley and Sasha Banks ahead of their payback match. We also saw Mr. McMahon task Adam Pearce with getting the contracts signed by Braun Strowman, Roman Reigns, and The Fiend. Now, the other thing that we saw here was Sami Zayn return and revealed that he is, in fact, the undefeated champion with the Intercontinental Championship. There was a bit of a face-off between Sami Zayn and Jeff Hardy. Now, what's quite interesting is I actually saw this on BT Sport, and I had the audio description on. So towards the end, after they're both holding up the belt saying, I'm the Intercontinental Champion, kind of like Daniel Bryan and Kane, what we saw was Sami Zayn go kick Jeff Hardy in the face, and Jeff Hardy taking that like an absolute trooper. He just fell straight back. But the audio description kind of spoiled it by saying, Sami Zayn prepares to kick Jeff Hardy in the face and then kicks him in the face. The audio description sometimes, perhaps, a little bit more than needs to happen. So, one of my favorite guys in WWE is Adam Pearce. He is a former NWA champion. He was part of the 7 Levels of Hate with Colt Cabana. He is Scrap Daddy. He is very much one of my favorite wrestlers. Somebody who I briefly stalked when we were at a WWE show. Long story. Watch last week's show if you want to find out what happened. So Adam Pearce was on SmackDown last week, and he was handed the task by Vince to go and get the signatures. He went and got Braun's signature. He went to get the Fiend's one, and he had to show up at the Firefly Funhouse where he became a postman. A lot of people, including Jim Cornette, find it to be cheesy and hokey. I thought it was funny, and I think that's the point. It's meant to be different, and Adam Pearce, like you could see from the way he's looking, he knew, like, what the hell am I dressed as a postie for? But, you know, he did it. And all of this was meant to lead up to getting Roman Reigns' signature at the end. And when they knocked on Roman Reigns' door, the door opened, Roman took the contract and said he was going to have to read it. And Roman then went into a promo with Adam Pearce beside him where he said, that's not a prediction, that's a spoiler, which of course is a Paul Heyman line. Camera pans back, turns around, there's Paul Heyman, and Paul Heyman just simply says, believe that. So Paul Heyman and Roman Reigns together. It obviously led to what happened at Payback. So let's quickly move and tell you what happened at Payback. We had the Riot Squad defeat the Iconics. Bobby Lashley defeated Apollo Crews. Big E defeated Sheamus. Matt Riddle defeated King Corbin. Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax defeated Bayley and Sasha Banks. They won the Women's Championships. Keith Lee defeated Randy Orton. Dominic Mysterio and Rey Mysterio defeated Seth Rollins and Murphy, although Rey Mysterio suffered a torn tricep on this, which was brutal by all accounts. Roman Reigns defeated The Fiend and Braun Strowman. Now, The Fiend and Braun Strowman started the match, and later on, when they were both kind of down and out, Roman Reigns came down and signed the contract and got the pin for the belt. So obviously we're getting to see he's no longer the honourable character that he was before. And to be absolutely fair, I'm a fan of where this is going to go. I think Roman Reigns has needed to be a heel for a long time. But this led to Raw. And for me, I've been enjoying Raw in recent weeks. We did open up with Randy Orton, Keith Lee in the ring, where there was a promo by Randy. Keith Lee came down, and it did see Dolph Ziggler come from behind and attack Keith Lee. But of course, they were meant to be having a match that was going to determine if they would be involved in the triple threat match later on to become the number one contender for Drew McIntyre's title. So this led to the Keith Lee Dolph Ziggler match being kickstarted early. We saw Keith Lee defeat Dolph Ziggler. Mickie James, Natalya, and Lana confronted Asuka, which obviously led to Natalya and Lana hitting Mickie James from behind, bumping her into Asuka. It led to Mickie James defeating Lana. Not unpredictable. You didn't think that was going to go long. Randy Orton defeated Kevin Owens to advance into the triple threat match. We also did see Aleister Black come out and drop the Black Mass onto Kevin Owens. Cedric Alexander and the Viking Raiders crushed the Hurt Business for their celebration. That was quite interesting here. Cedric Alexander came down on his own, and MVP went out to the ramp and basically said, "I see you're on your own. Are you going to be joining the Hurt Business?" Cedric says, "Well, I'm not on my own." And the Viking Raiders ran from behind. Something that would be a very different process if it was done with an audience, but it came across well. Cedric Alexander and the Viking Raiders defeated the Hurt Business. The Riot Squad defeated the Iconics. Now, the stipulation here was that whoever lost as a tag team would have to disband. Whoever won would get a tag title shot. So Ruby Riott and Liv Morgan are going to get a tag title shot against Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler. The Iconics, however, had to disband, but there will be more about that later on in Raw. Seth Rollins defeated Dominic Mysterio to advance into the triple threat match for the title. We then go into Raw Underground, where we see Riddick Moss defeat Titus O'Neil after Titus had actually had a match against somebody and looked very, very strong. I think Riddick Moss, somebody who's going to gain a lot from this. We then saw a backstage segment that was recorded earlier in the day, which was R-Truth defeating Akira Tozawa. There was a traffic cop who stopped him in the car park and basically said that his name wasn't on the list, he couldn't get in. Tozawa got out to look at the list and said, "Well, these are all blank pieces of paper." And behind you could see R-Truth, and R-Truth was coming out of the little doorway behind him, and the guy ripped open his jacket, and he's a referee. 1, 2, 3, R-Truth is a 39-time 24/7 champion. Now, this is where we move into the next match, which was the Street Profits and Andrade and Angel Garza, where Retribution came out and actually attacked them all. Apparently now Retribution are a Raw exclusive brand, company, brand, faction, whatever they want to call themselves. They're going to be exclusive to Raw heading forward, apparently. So it's going to be quite interesting to see where they go. Apparently now the people that are underneath the hoods have all been decided. It seems to be the same people every week, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Then we moved to Raw Underground, where we saw Jessamyn Duke, who actually knocked out Billie Kay after Peyton Royce threw her into the Underground ring. Obviously, that friendship is now somewhat damaged, and we're getting to see that Peyton Royce is the heel. Perhaps they're going to turn Billie Kay into a baby face, and perhaps they're going to make her quite comical because she's been quite funny in recent months. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. We did also see Marina Shafir get involved, and Marina Shafir had some very good judo-style takedowns. Marina Shafir, I believe, is Roderick Strong's wife. It's interesting that they would be on Raw Underground because I really thought that you would see Roderick Strong and the Undisputed Era get called up first, but apparently not. I mean, this teaming of Jessamyn Duke and Marina Shafir were obviously with Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler as the Horsewomen. They are all very, very talented, although Marina Shafir is the same height as me, 5'7", and I'm a bit short. But she has a very good look. She is married to Roderick Strong. We head into the Hurt Business brutalizing Apollo Crews, Ricochet, and Cedric Alexander in the Raw Underground. I think the Underground segments are designed for people like Bobby Lashley. I think they come across very well in them. But we need to start seeing some form of payoff beyond the Hurt Business going over every week. Riddick Moss has been looking strong. I think Jessamyn Duke and Marina Shafir have looked good, but let's see those people come into the main show and have matches and win. That would be a benefit of this. Now, we move into the triple threat match. Randy Orton defeated Keith Lee and Seth Rollins to earn a WWE Championship match. Clash of Champions. So obviously, Randy Orton is going to be again facing off against Drew McIntyre, who wasn't on the show, selling the injuries from last week. All I'm going to say is if Drew McIntyre can sell the injuries, then surely Shawn Michaels could sell the injuries. Anyway, let's move quickly to NXT. There's going to be no AEW this week. We're just going to talk about NXT, which was the 4-way 60-minute Iron Man match involving 4 of the best wrestlers that NXT have. And this is something that, as we go into this, any of those 4 could win that match. Now, obviously, Tommaso Ciampa, Adam Cole, Finn Balor, and Johnny Gargano, all four could be the champion of that brand and do very well. We will talk about the finish of that match very soon. Isaiah Swerve Scott and Breezango defeated Legado del Fantasma in a 6-man street fight. I'm a big fan of Legado del Fantasma. I believe that they've done very well in recent weeks. And I think the involvement of Imperium in this match to kind of get revenge over Fandango, I like Imperium. I just don't think they're going to connect as well as you would want with an American audience. But I think that they're exactly what NXT needed as tag team champions. Breezango getting the belts last week was an absolute joke as far as I'm concerned. But Santos Escobar, somebody who I see future main event star, certainly an NXT main event. He is a very good wrestler, but he is the Cruiserweight champion just now. And that 6-man street fight was very, very good. There's quite a few pieces in there that was clearly set pieces. There was maybe some editing involved, but it came across very well. I'm also a fan of Isaiah Swerve Scott. I think Isaiah has the size and the charisma to actually do something when he gets called up, and he will. He will be called up. There's no way he's going to be stuck on NXT forever. We then saw Candice LeRae defeat Casey Catanzaro, who had Kaden Carter in her corner. Casey walked away from the business for a little bit. She's Ricochet's partner in real life. She walked away from the business for a little bit, so it's quite interesting to see her back. And okay, she didn't win, but she's back wrestling, and she clearly has the bug again, which is good. We saw Timothy Thatcher defeat Bronson Reed. Now, for me, that's big. Bronson's somebody that if I was in charge, I'd be protecting him every week, making sure that he doesn't lose ever. I want him to be unbeatable. But Timothy Thatcher and Bronson Reed both have their eyes on Damian Priest's North American Championship. So it'll be interesting to see that 3-way feud. But there was a sneak attack from Austin Theory as well. But it does put Thatcher one step closer to a title shot. So hopefully in time that will be something that will play out. And I'd love to see Bronson Reed step up and go for the big title rather than the North American one. So relatively short on other content. This week was the 60-minute Iron Man match, which obviously, although it's 60 minutes, has to take more than 60 minutes when you include entrances and what happened afterwards. So we did see a 2-2 draw. Adam Cole and Finn Balor finished in a 2-2 draw in the 4-way Iron Man match. So instead of there being co-champions, they've decided that there's going to be NXT Super Tuesday 2, where they will determine a NXT champion. And this is going to be definitive. Finn Balor or Adam Cole. For me, Finn Balor getting the belt here would be the start of a fresh start for the company. And it's something I would really love to see. I think as it relates to NXT, there is a real need for them to actually do something big and change away from what they presently have. I don't think that the NXT brand benefits by another 2 years of the Undisputed Era. So last week on the show, I asked you to go out of your way to check out You Cannot Kill David Arquette. I hadn't seen it, but I had seen the trailer, and it looked fascinating. So just to let you know, I have actually been able to catch it, and wow, it's so much better than I thought, but at the same time, very, very strange. So to give you some details without giving you too many spoilers, obviously it talks quite in depth about his WCW World title run, and you get some opinion from Courtney Cox and several others, and it doesn't, they're not crapping all over David, but at the same time, Courtney is quite blunt about how she felt at the time and how she felt that it wasn't the most productive use of his time. And obviously, it comes across quite quickly that the WCW run damaged David Arquette's career. David's at one point sat in his car and he's talking about the fact that afterwards, he couldn't be taken seriously, and getting acting roles just isn't something that happened. He's said that, for a long time he's been going on auditions and he's never been getting parts. So wrestling has actually damaged his career, unlike what happened with The Rock. So that's not even the best part of it. There's some weird stuff in there, clearly staged for the documentary, including one segment where he is presented with a mask, which he's obviously very happy to get, and they end up going up on top of a hill and making lots of weird noises. It's clear that 95% of this documentary is 100% for real. However, there are other things that they've clearly done to try and get you to see how willing he is to do anything. And when these guys tell him he has to take part in this ritual, he happily does it. We're getting to see how happy he was to do anything he could. And that's what led to his match against Nick Gage. Nick Gage, the former criminal who nearly killed him. If you haven't seen You Cannot Kill David Arquette yet, go out of your way to see it. I will highly recommend at least check out the trailer, see what you think. It's a great documentary. It's well produced, certainly something that should be on your must-watch list. And this comes in a week where WWE have had other documentaries come out. There was one quite interesting thing that I have gathered from a WWE SummerSlam documentary from, I think it was 2015's SummerSlam. Seth Rollins is heading out to the ring, and Seth doesn't have the world title. He walks up to a cabinet, opens a drawer, and takes out his title. So WWE have their TV belts in a chest of drawers at ringside, and the wrestlers grab them, and then when they come back, they dump them straight back in. So that's kind of an interest. This is the kind of thing we should be seeing from documentaries. As much as I want to see, big revelations about people as humans, I also really like to see the inner workings of the wrestling business. And when you are backstage at indie shows in the David Arquette documentary, when you're getting to see behind the scenes of WWE, for me, that's the most interesting part of the business. As much as I love what goes on in the ring, I really do think that a weekly behind the scenes show would probably do really well. Particularly, I don't mean something like Backstage, which wasn't behind the scenes. It was all scripted. I mean somebody walking backstage with a camera at particular times, recording stuff and then airing it. That way you could potentially get Randy Orton out of character. You could get Vince McMahon standing and have a conversation with Michael Hayes. You get to see these things because we see the characters. And although, yeah, people will say kayfabe's important, and it is, at the same time, I really do think that we're past kayfabe now. We're at the point where a lot of these people are very accessible. So let's have access to the reality side of it. I think WWE have a platform of their own. They could actually produce a reality show and even just air 1 hour bubbles of it every week. I think it'd be fascinating. Particularly, let's see what a production meeting looks like. They can edit it. It's for the future. But I think a WWE reality show that was produced out with the WWE, so, E or somebody came in and edited together this footage, and WWE have the final say to remove things that are sensitive. But certainly, I think WWE would benefit from the exposure. What do you guys think? So we're not going to have the AEW TV show this week. We are going to briefly mention some bits and bobs. So one of the things that's quite interesting is that we have on Saturday night, we have All Out, which features Jon Moxley versus MJF as the main event. Also Chris Jericho versus Orange Cassidy. We also have Kenny Omega and Hangman Page versus FTR. There is, of course, also Thunder Rosa featured in a match against the AEW Women's Champion. So let's go through the list of matches and we'll see if we can make some predictions and see how good we are at predictions for next week. So Britt Baker versus Big Swole in a tooth and nail match. Britt Baker should get the win there. Swole is awful in the ring. Matt Hardy versus Sammy Guevara, Broken Rules match. If Hardy loses, he must leave AEW. I would like to think that's probably what's going to happen. I think Matt Hardy was unhappy about creative in WWE. I don't think he's been very happy about creative in AEW either. So I think he's basically that starving artist. I don't think he's going to be happy unless he's the top of the card. And I'm not saying even being the champion, but I think he maybe needs to be in a particular place when it comes to being on shows. Next, we have the Dark Order, which is Brody Lee, Colt Cabana, Evil Uno, and Stu Grayson versus Matt Cardona, Scorpio Sky, and the Natural Nightmares, which is Dustin Rhodes and QT Marshall. For me personally, I think the Dark Order will get the win there. Brody Lee, of course, is their champion, the TNT champion. And I think that it doesn't help Cardona, Sky, and the Natural Nightmares to get the win there. I think you certainly would want to put some hot air underneath Dark Order and build up their momentum. So Dark Order are the ones I would pick for the win there. And this is where it gets interesting. So last year they had the Casino Battle Royal. I'm not a fan of these. I find these to be an absolute waste of time. But it will be another chance for us to see Eddie Kingston, which will be great. I'm a big fan of his. Let's look at some of the names that are going to be in this. Darby Allin, Lance Archer, who they've completely misused. Brian Cage, refer to Lance Archer. Ricky Starks, who's doing well. Pentagon, Ray Phoenix, who probably should be better in a tag team match somewhere rather than throwing them into the Casino Battle Royal match. The Butcher, The Blade, Eddie Kingston, Shawn Spears, Billy and Austin Gunn, Jake Hager, Santana Ortiz, Chuck Taylor, Trent, and somebody who hasn't been announced yet. So the last Battle Royal type thing they did featured Brian Cage winning and getting an instant title shot. For me, I think depends who wins the main event. Jon Moxley's the champion, then you would want to be having somebody like Lance Archer, maybe Jake Hager. Whereas if MJF wins, then you're looking at potentially trying to go down the route of, and this might be controversial, but Billy Gunn, because MJF can then defeat another older talent who's ex-WWE. So I want to take two picks on that one. So Lance Archer, if Jon Moxley retains, Billy Gunn, or the surprise participant if MJF wins. Hikaru Shida versus Thunder Rosa. Thunder Rosa is the NWA champion. We spoke about her in the news section. Big fan of Thunder Rosa. Hikaru Shida, not so much. Shida has to win here. Certainly, Shida will retain the title. I think Thunder Rosa being NWA and AEW champion would be very interesting, but I'm just not sure. We move on to Kenny Omega and Adam Page versus FTR, Cash Wheeler and Dax Harwood. I want to point out something. So a fan actually said that when the question was, why do you call yourself Dax and Cash? Somebody said jokingly, it's a homage to Axe and Smash. And apparently that's true. I think that's amazing. FTR, head and shoulders above every other tag team in that company. If you disagree, that's fine. But they are head and shoulders above every other tag team in that company. I think them getting the title would be the ideal thing. I think even better if the Young Bucks were the ones that cost Kenny Omega and Adam Page the belt. And if they do, that could create some tension between Omega and the Bucks. But he may also understand the Bucks are just getting Adam Page back. So that could cause quite a big split and rift in the Elite. So I'm going to go for FTR. FTR with the Young Bucks costing Omega and Page the belts. Chris Jericho versus Orange Cassidy, the Mimosa Mayhem. It's a heavily gimmicked match. I think Orange Cassidy could win that and it would be fine. Not a fan of his, but I think he could win it and be fine. But for me, Chris Jericho has to get the win. We move on to the main event, Jon Moxley versus MJF with Wardlow for the AEW World Championship. Moxley is banned from using the Paradigm Shift. Man, this one's hard. It's tough to tell. I have to give an answer. I think Jon Moxley wins, but not clean. MJF, somebody's going to screw MJF over, and that's going to be a feud to help build MJF long term. I think just now is too early for him to get that belt without people being a bit disappointed. I think Lance Archer is going to cost MJF the title, and Lance Archer versus Jon Moxley at the next pay-per-view. That's my call. Let's see how right I'm going to be. So welcome to the bit after the show. So today's show was meant to be longer. We were meant to have an interview with Stuart Murphy, and surprise, surprise, he bailed on us and didn't do it. Now, the reason for the interview was a follow-up to the interview he was meant to have last week. So last week he was meant to be on to promote the fact that he was having a match for a backyard wrestling company. He decided that he didn't want to respond to messages, so he didn't actually feature in the show. We then said to him, so how about you do one next week? And instead of talking about the match coming up, we'll talk about what happened in the match and see what happens. Yeah, sounds good. We then, of course, didn't have the interview because Murphy only wants to be able to send in videos. He doesn't want to be asked questions, which, for me, seems to kind of explain quite a lot. However, he sent us nearly 6 minutes long video, and this was recorded. According to him, he said to me that he recorded this mere minutes after his backyard wrestling match. And all I can say is, not only does he now have an enemy in JJ, he also has one in the backyard wrestlers that he was working with. Now, obviously, backyard wrestlers are frowned upon. Backyard wrestlers are something that real professional wrestlers look down on backyard wrestlers, and rightfully so. Even more so when they don't film their footage, they don't have social media, and all of these other things, especially when they also more than likely haven't followed COVID regulations. Now, I mention this because, and I know Murphy probably will be sitting there thinking when he sees this go out, probably don't want you to talk about that, but let's talk about it. Stuart Murphy did a backyard wrestling match with almost zero security protocols in place and is right now self-isolating because of COVID-19. So there is now absolutely zero reason for Stuart Murphy to have no time to come and speak to us, especially when he records videos and sends them in, but doesn't have 10 minutes to even do a quick interview. So what I want to put out there is the last video that we're going to air of Stuart Murphy until Stuart Murphy is willing to grace us with his presence for an interview. I've already managed to get an interview out of JJ. I'm sure there's going to be another interview with JJ coming up, particularly as we get fans back into wrestling. That's something I want to do. I want to get JJ back on. We have featured, obviously, Zoe Styles, the producer. We've featured Gordon Stephen in recent weeks, who's taken a week off because he was involved in a quiz night that hopefully we're going to get up on YouTube. Had production issues. However, it is at least somewhat funny. But we have a real issue with Murphy sending in videos and not willing to actually speak. I think the last message I had from Murphy, if I look, was him saying that he'd be free to do an interview tomorrow, which is the day after the show goes out. So he's finding excuse after excuse. I mean, last week's excuse, just to be clear, which came after he saw that I'd called him out on the show, was that he had put his phone down on the table and it was on silent, but you were in the middle of a conversation. So that's absolutely not an excuse in any way, shape or form. Unacceptable to tell somebody you're going to give them an interview and not give them it. However, we will air this footage, even though I certainly think the last couple of sentences are designed purely by Murphy to cause trouble between me and Murphy, me and JJ, somebody who I've been friends with since I was about 15 years old. So that's 20 years plus of friendship that somebody I've known for about a year is trying to actually cause trouble with. This, unless he's willing to do an interview, is the last you will see of Stuart Murphy on this show.
So that's it. Backyard's done. No more backyard wrestling. And I've just been out there and I have thanked everyone for coming out and giving me the send-off that I deserve. But in honesty, I couldn't really give a toss about anyone that turned up. Because at the end of the day, You're all animals. This company, fans, talent, management, anyone, they're all animals. This isn't wrestling. This is brutality. Why should I stay here and risk losing limbs, breaking bones, potentially dying, when I could and should be at the top of Scottish wrestling? And that's exactly where I belong, and that's exactly where I'm going to be. I'm going to CWF, and I'm going to be the pinnacle of Scottish wrestling. And I don't need any backyard promotion to do it. Any useless, talentless, violent wannabes. I don't need one single one of them. And as I said, I'm going to CWF. That's my company, and I will be at the top of Scottish wrestling, and I will be the pinnacle of Scottish wrestling. I will be Scottish wrestling, because it is who I should be. Which means there's only one thing left to do. You can't have a company if you don't have a top title in the company. So, why don't we announce a tournament? A CWF heavyweight title tournament. There's only one man I see fitting to be in that, and you're looking at him. I am a champion. I don't need a belt to say that I'm a champion. But there is no single person out there who will stop me from being the heavyweight champion. I'll go one better. Nobody's to stop me from being a world champion. But it leads me thinking, there's still the whole ongoing JJ Andrews situation. So here's what I'm going to say. JJ, you're right. I'm the reason that you aren't anywhere near CWF. I'm the reason that you're not getting a shot. And I'm happy to say that I am still not giving you a shot. But I'm going to make you a compromise. You want to be on show 1 so badly. I'll leave you tickets. That's right, I'll leave you front row tickets, so that you can be in the front row for show 1. You're technically at the show. You're just not there in the way that you want to be. But you're there in the way you deserve. So you can sit front row and you can watch as I, the person that you hate the most in this world, rises to the top of Scottish wrestling. And you can like it, or you can leave. It's that simple. And for anyone here in this company that wants a shot, none of you have what it takes to be a pro wrestler. You're all brutal, you're barbaric, and you make me sick to my very stomach, the fact that I even agreed to do this for as long as I did. What you seen out there was Stu Cahill, and he's dead and buried. What you see in here right now, this is Murphy, the owner of Caledonian Wrestling Federation, and the soon-to-be Caledonian Wrestling Federation heavyweight champion. So take a long, hard look, because this right here, this is the future of Scottish wrestling. And JJ Andrews gets a front row seat to witness history. So until show 1, I will leave you with this little teaser, if you will. Now, I've been pondering whether or not to say this, but I'm going to say it. JJ Andrews, you think you have friends? Even those over at Headlocks and Headphones who are bashing me consistently, you think you have friends. You might want to check that fact, because I think the guys over there at Headlocks and Headphones are playing you and are taking you along for a ride that you physically aren't able to go on. But I want you to ponder something. Are the guys in that show really your friends? Or are they really mine?